Good evening, councillors. Welcome. Nice smiley faces. Well, first of all, we've got to go through the evacuation. There is no fire alarm scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of the room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. And to remind you, we're being webcast, so be good. And please switch your phones off if you haven't. Right, item 1, which is apologies. I've got substitution Richard Colt for Councillor Perry, and apologies from Councillor Ketcher. Are there any more? No. Right. Declare. Has anybody got any to declare any interest? No. Urgent matters. I have none. Minutes of the last meeting. Do we agree to the minutes of the last meeting? Agreed. Right, I shall sign them after the meeting. This is where we've got a new, where have we gone? We've got a new service manager, which is Chris Williams at the end. And so we can give him a good time tonight, show how much we know. And what else have we got in this paper?
Fees and charges.
Eh?
Fees and charges. That bit there.
That's for the charges, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Right, minutes. Right. Item 5, consideration of mandatory CCTV licensed vehicles. I'll open it to the officers to go forward.
Good evening, councillors. Okay, so originally we were asked to prepare a paper on mandatory CCTV in licensed vehicles. Then was requested that we further investigate the subject. This is the paper from that. So the assessment has been done by the licensing department on the introduction of mandatory CCTV. And in summary, the basis on the evidence available, there's no compelling grounds for mandatory CCTV to be introduced within the Basingstoke area. Within Hampshire, there are 2 coastal authorities that have mandatory CCTV, which were implemented after significant safeguarding concerns and crimes involving the licensing trade taxis, and that is why that was implemented. The demographics of Basingstoke and Deane compared to the Portsmouth and Southampton areas are vastly different, as they're both coastal towns with not only permanent residents but also the influx and outflux of a migrating population as well, which adds to their crime profile. The crime profile for Basingstoke and Deane in the last 4 years shows no physical assaults reported to the police involving licensed vehicles. When asked, and we spoke to the trade, 58% of the trade did not want, when they were just asked, licensed vehicles. Those that initially thought it was a good idea for the nighttime economy, when they were asked if they wanted to pay for it, said that it should be fully funded if we were going to make it mandatory. We approached the Crime Commissioner's section and looked at funding from there. So they do provide funding, which is in the paper, but only at a fraction of the money that would be needed just for the equipment, not including installation, annual fees for data storage and other costs that would come. And so these fees would then go back to the customers through the fact that the drivers would then have to pay for them. So 280 responses we had to the consultation. We didn't, as was requested, go out to the public because we did not want to raise expectations on something that we are merely discussing as a possibility. But I did approach and speak to a number of community groups with specific characteristics, as it's some that support the disabled and some that support different cultures. And we got feedback from them, but again, most of them said that they didn't think it was a necessity in Basingstoke and Deane. So our recommendation is that we maintain the current policy, which includes discretionary voluntary CCTV, continue to monitor the local evidence, improve enhancements around the town, like the CCTV that is going up at the taxi rank, but not to mandate CCTV in the licensed trade.
There's a bit of a comment and a bit of a question, if I may, Emma. I hear what you say about the 60% said no. I think what's really interesting in here is I think it's incredibly unusual to ask a group of people if they want something done to them in a statutory way, that 42% said yes. And that sort of worries me, that I'm astounded 42% have said yes. I'm in some respects, I'm not, the context of it doesn't make me think of it as like a majority. I look at that and go, 42% of people said yes, they wanted something done to them. And then in the other pie chart, 67% said yes or maybe, that they thought compulsory CCTV would be a positive change. And I just wondered if we knew why those two figures were so high. Because I get the whole thing about it's a different story when it comes to cost, etc., but those two stats on their own astound me.
Okay, so 42% of those that responded, but only a third of the licensing trade responded. I went out and spoke to some other people within the licensing trade who hadn't sent through representation, said that they didn't bother responding because they didn't want it. And they thought if they hadn't responded, then it would be automatically classed as the fact that they didn't want it. Whereas these results just show those that had applied through the portal and responded to our questions.
Brilliant. And the other thing is, I don't know whether something was said in Parliament about the government being minded to make it compulsory, and that wasn't that long ago, and whether we've heard anything more about that within your profession.
So yes, it is being discussed, but it's also being discussed in the context of the white paper whether taxi licensing will remain with the districts and boroughs or go and be a Hampshire-wide thing. If it does go Hampshire-wide, it will then be taken over by the Ministry of Transport and they will administer it slightly differently. There's lots of things being said, as there always are, in the run-up to people bidding and doing elections. Whether any of that comes to pass, they've said it lots of times before and nothing's happened.
Yeah, I think a concern that I see is that we're developing more housing a long way from the centre of town, and certainly in my ward, we don't have public transport serving that, or the likelihood that we will in the near future, which means there'll be quite a lot of people taking taxis, and they may well find the level of fares, as I find myself getting home, very high. And that is quite likely to cause tension between passengers and drivers. Are we confident that we won't have an increasing problem in this area.
Well, obviously, the drivers need to recoup the money that we charge them. We try each year to have a look at our practices to keep our fees and charges as low as possible. But as you're all aware through the training, being a taxi driver is the most legislated entry-level position in the country because of public safety, which involves a lot of costs, having DBSs. If you've come in from a different country, you need a certificate of good conduct, you need a medical at a level higher than that of an everyday driver. All of these things cost money. So just to add an extra cost on when actually we don't have the evidence to do it would drive up the prices for the customer.
Yeah, I think the problem really is that if you're around, I think the 9 o'clock period, if you've taken a taxi in the day, you get a fare out to Hounslow Fields, probably £15. But if you do it after 9 o'clock, you may well be over £20. And that difference could cause a lot of friction. That's really the concern I have.
Thank you, Chair. I know you said you didn't go out to a public consultation, so you haven't got a lot of feedback from the public. But is there any sort of evidence that the public are minded to choose those few taxis that have got the system built in?
So, yeah, we didn't actually go out to the public as we would do with normal consultations, but I did speak to different community groups and there were members of the public there. And the feedback that I got, especially from some of the groups that support our disabled community, is they felt it would be a further invasion of privacy for them. They use the taxi trade rather than public transport because they find it safer, and some of them struggle already going out. And some said completely the opposite. Some found that it would actually make them feel safer. And as we discussed it on the first time, it is a balancing act, but there is no crime evidence that we need to make it mandatory.
Thank you, Chair. You don't necessarily have to answer that. It's just a comment that I thought. I don't think we went out and got what exactly the users feel. We've got the trade to have their say, but there are users who they or may have slightly different view to this, and even as part of the trade, there's only a proportion of the actual users respond to this. And in terms of the principle of what you mentioned about, even in Hampshire, the two authorities installed it after two significant safeguarding concerns, but there's no harm in us being preventative and think about coming up with something than wait until having some form of safeguarding concerns to rise within our borough.
I understand where you're coming from, but being preventative actually might make the trade less safe, because a lot of people from the trade in their response said this would be the straw that broke the camel's back. The additional cost would drive them out of the trade. To have a safe nighttime economy, which is the area where they think that this would have been a benefit, you need a robust trade. And if we drive people out, actually we're making our residents less safe rather than protecting them.
Thank you. I was wondering, the funding that we could apply for this is, as it says, they're very limited. But could we apply for that funding for those drivers who do want to go for the CCTV in their cars as a sort of a pilot scheme, perhaps even, to see whether it is more popular with the public if they've got CCTV cameras, and whether other drivers would then think it's a really good idea? Could we apply for funding for those drivers, or do you think that would be a non-starter? Thanks.
obviously the question that was posed to us was, do we think we should make it mandatory in licensed vehicles? And yes, I'm sure people would go for the funding, but that's not the question that we're currently reviewing.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to kind of hop back to Councillor Ganesh's point around the serious incidents that had happened. Have you got any details of those serious incidents?
Yes, but they would not be presented in a public forum.
And so we don't think being proactively safe around that would be what we should be doing as opposed to what we are doing?
I think we can be proactively safe with the taxi trade, implementing other things rather than mandatory CCTV. The increased security at the taxi rank that's going up, in later on when we go through the forward plan, our involvement in Operation Make Safe, that we're just starting to get involved with, which is about people trafficking and the issues that came out of Rotherham case and bits and pieces. That is happening, the safeguarding training that we now give our drivers, that happens every 3 years. We are doing things to make the community safer. I don't think we need to be invasive with CCTV.
The trouble is, without knowing the incidents that have happened, we don't know if proactive safety measures would have stopped them. That's the point that I'm making, is that... Sorry, they're having a whisper.
So they were severe Crown Court prosecuted offences that took place. There were 5 in Southampton and there were 6 in Portsmouth. But I can't give you any more detail than that.
Were they caused by the public in the taxi or the driver driving the public?
A combination of both.
So that to me sounds like a proactive measure would have kind of reduced the likelihood of those incidents.
But then that goes back to the point that I made earlier, that coastal towns have a very different crime profile to those who are landlocked, because they don't just have the permanent residents. We have a few people that come in and out of Basingstoke and Deane, whereas they have a constant transient population as well, which also adds to the issues.
I just add on that we have to keep going back to the word proportionality. You know, CCTV absolutely everywhere would likely reduce crime everywhere, but you have to be proportionate about where it goes. People have a right to privacy, as Emma's just said. So we have to base it on the local picture. And thankfully, we've never had incidents anywhere near like that type of nature or number around here. So I think you're right. You know, preventative measures are of course important, and that's why we do all the training we do and the safeguarding checks. But it has to be by law proportionate.
Councillor Morris-Bowles.
I just want to pick up, Chris, you know, let's make sure your first meeting's interesting. That I think the reason why this request happened in the first place was actually, as members, I felt like there's no need, we hadn't really investigated, we hadn't discussed it, and I hear your point, Emma, that says the request was about compulsory CCTV, but as one of the protagonists of making sure that we investigated it, it felt like I was responding to a very blank wall no. Why would we do that, councillor? And I think we're now in a position where we can look through some of the other things that we could do and the actions that we can take. And also, just thinking about your proportionality, I think it also says in the legislation that actually licensing authorities should, it's almost an expectation to do it, unless the authority has a reason not to. So it's sort of an opting out rather than an opting in, which I suspect changes that balance slightly. I also think some of the things that informed my view was actually there are some things that we often get in reports, and we have one in the report in front of us, which doesn't tell us the whole story. There is something here in 5.6 that says police reports show no recorded physical assaults involving licensed vehicles in the borough during the last 4 years. Yet we have had an officer in one of our training sessions show us CCTV from a building that gave us information that we would not have had if it had not have been coincidental that an incident happened outside a building involving a licensed vehicle and the building happened to have CCTV. And I suppose there's something about that says just because we don't know it, just because it hasn't been reported to the police, and I absolutely hear what you're saying about the difference between Basingstoke, Portsmouth and Southampton, but there are also other things that Basingstoke is in the top 3 for things like county lines, and actually I'm sure lots of that activity is in things like taxis as well as public transport and electric scooters, and I suppose that's why I sit here. And I am very concerned that I'm hearing no, absolutely not, there is no evidence. Yet actually, there seems to be a little bit more of a broad-mindedness from councillors that says, are we sure, and can we not take a position that does focus on prevention, where we don't want to be Portsmouth and Southampton, and I suspect that's why we are expressing a view that says this might help us not to be. And I get that some of the things you're being asked are things that would never happen, because I can't imagine if I need a taxi, and taxis are difficult to get hold of at 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning when I've got off Saturday night when I've got off the train from London, I'm going to phone up a taxi and say, and can I choose to have the one with CCTV, and it makes me wait another hour. It is not going to happen. But actually, that's why, for me, there's something about doing the statutory thing. And there's something for me that says, I absolutely get that there's potentially no reason to do statutory. I would just like to move away from it a bit, that turns around and says, I think just making sure we all feel comfortable, because ultimately, I think as a licensing committee, we're in the deciding seat rather than the portfolio holder. I just feel like I'd like a little bit more thought. So I get why this is a good report and says, do you know what, perhaps you don't want statutory, but I think there is another piece of work, especially when I hear a government says somebody is thinking about it, making it statutory. And do you know what, all the reasons why we might not do it, because we're very concerned, quite rightly, about taxi drivers paying for it themselves. If it was done at a regional level, some of that monetary issue might get taken away because they might have lower fees or they might absorb the cost, etc., etc. And I just don't want us to get into a bit of a battle. I just want to explain my view, which says, I get it, but actually I think there's something else that we need to consider and think about.
And I completely understand where you're coming from, and it's not a blanket no to safeguarding our public. As I mentioned earlier, when we get to the forward plan, there are other things that we are doing, working with the police on Operation Make Safe, which is completely about county lines and the use of taxis, and obviously underage hotel use and other bits and pieces to help keep them safe without the necessity of mandatory CCTV. We are putting up extra CCTV at the rank. There are other things that we are doing as a licensing department away from this issue that will help safeguard our community.
Councillor Holt.
Thank you, Chair. I think that the reason I put my hand up initially is because when I was sort of putting my mind to thinking about some of the other things that we can do, sort of fully appreciating that this, report does show that there might not be an absolute, evidential base for a statutory thing. Around some of the reasons that we debated last time, the reasons why CCTV might be good, the example of picking up on potential domestic violence cases was raised, and as part of the Domestic Violence Champions Group, I've recently become aware that the local service provider, Stop Domestic Abuse, offers training. It's like a short form, sort of couple of hours training for people out in trades like this, hairdressers or barbers or taxi drivers or whoever might encounter members of the public and be in that situation. So that might be something that we might consider. introducing to our drivers at some point. Whether or not that's, you know, on a you must all do this immediately, because I understand that they do have a lot of obligations on them, but we could perhaps think about how that might be offered. And also, just following up on what Simon just said, I wonder if you could let us know at what point we might hear a bit more about the make safe thing that you were talking about, so we know when we might expect sort of news on that bit of work.
So the first bit of training, so the safeguarding training that they do is specifically designed for taxi drivers to recognise things like county lines, children that are regularly being dropped off to inappropriate places or going on long journeys, domestic abuse, what they do, where they report it, how they can help these people without endangering themselves because they are lone workers. So that's already incorporated into our safeguarding training that they have to undertake every 3 years. And make safe at the next council meeting.
Yeah, we're being told, Chair, that that having CCTV at the station will, the taxi rank there, will be the benefit or will reduce the problem. But do we have any statistics that say that, A, in Basingstoke we don't normally know who the passengers are, because I think in general they have to phone in and book and they will be picked up there. But presumably the purpose of the CCTV is to show the nature of the incident that takes place, and that won't happen at the station.
No, one of the reasons the taxi CCTV is going in at the station is because they aren't pre-booked. So if you pre-book through an operator, you have to give your details and then they will send a private hire vehicle to you. If you get into a Hackney carriage at the station, this camera will capture who gets in if there is an incident that occurs, because they don't have any records because they are higher at the curbside.
Thank you. So I just wanted to pick up on 5.7 in the report, which is 50% of drivers saying that they've been verbally abused. Do we have any idea on the breakdown of that abuse? Is it people saying, you know, no, I'm not paying, or is it racially motivated abuse? Is it, you know, at what level, how have we decided that that's 50% verbal abuse and not, how is it being reported, etc.? So is it abusive language, people who are being abusive in the taxis to the drivers, or is it the drivers being abusive? Probably not, but how have we got there, and do we not think that that's too much?
Yeah, 100%. We do think that that's too much, and that is something that we're working with the trade on. A lot of it is drunk people who are just abusive to taxi drivers. A proportion of it is racially motivated, and we encourage them to report that to us and to the police. So we can, if you notice in the report, the operators, where the ones that were racially motivated, they no longer allow those people to take taxis. But that's through our private hire operators. Our Hackney carriage trade we have a really close relationship with, and they do let us know through the Hackney Federation if things like that have occurred. But yeah, no, one person being abused doing their job is too many.
Sorry. Did we offer the drivers, the licensees, any time frame that we would be making this mandatory in? Because if we, obviously the time frame matters. If we say it's going to be mandatory in 5 years, then that's a very different conversation to if it's being made mandatory overnight, to, you know, save up for it or anything like that.
Their response is the same whether it's now or in the future.
Thank you, Chair. I think the we've asked half of the users, which are the trades, and out of those, the 50% said they have had some form of abuse. But what we don't have is the evidence to present what it was and what serious level that was. So the issue we have here is what we don't know. What we know is the half the trade got some form of verbal abuse, and we can just say, oh, drunk people do abuse taxi drivers and move on. No, it's as you suggested, it's not the case. Fine, but the rest of the half, we don't have the evidence of what level of abuse they faced, and even if we have somebody willing to go and take them to court or report to police, we don't have the evidence to. So, and we only ask half the people who use the trade, and half of them said they had some form of abuse. So the issue that I have is the people who we haven't asked from the trade and the rest of the population who use. So we are making a decision based on the half of the trade said they already said they got some form of abuse, and saying we still don't need one. So it's a bit of a situation that's not really something for me personally feel comfortable supporting it. That's where I stand with this, to be honest with you, Emma. Thank you.
Okay, so that 50% was of those that responded, so that's actually a sixth of the entire trade. Because if you think the majority of the trade didn't respond, which is why I had to physically go and speak to some people, because they're not always the most engaging of people. And yeah, no, I completely agree. Any form of abuse should not be tolerated by anybody in the workplace. But a lot of them, especially those who've been doing it a long time, just see it as part and parcel of their job, and that's a mindset that we do need to change because it's not acceptable.
I would like to say a few things. When I first read this, I thought, well, yeah, it's a great idea, but to my mind at the moment, what's going to happen with the data? You know, there's more behind the scenes than what there is out front, and that's going to be a major problem. What I don't want to do, and we're not just talking about taxi drivers, we're talking about private hire as well. That concerns me. I don't know how that would work in a normal vehicle. There's a lot to be looked into, and my view is it's quite simple. If the government wishes it to happen, the government should put some money forward. Now, if we wish it to happen, we need to put not the drivers, because all it gets passed on is to the public. It would stop any attack, I would think, if people knew, but I don't know, perhaps it's my upbringing when I was young, but when people are drunk, they don't care whether there's CCTV or anything, they will go ahead. The only good thing is that if it's good enough, it's evidence. So I think if the government wants it, I think we should look into it a little bit deeper. That's where I would say. I don't know what the officer's view is on it, but I don't think we're in a position to make that decision tonight.
So what exactly do you want us to look into deeper?
What I would say would be later on, you know, how's it going to work? It's not going to happen overnight. You know, we got CCTV in the town centre. Someone monitors that. Who's going to monitor this? Or are we going to have the driver just holding it, and if he feels like saying, well, I was abused last night, this is the person who done it. We got to, and I don't think we're in that position at the moment to go forward. I think we just, in my view, we just leave it as it is on the books and maybe put it in a works programme again for next year and have another look. By then the government might have decided to make it compulsory, and then we go forward. Does that make it? I don't know if there's a question there, but.
There kind of was a question. So in the original paper, it did say that these units, they wouldn't be able to be accessed by the driver. They'd be continually recording all of the time and would only be able to be accessed by a special laptop with a password if an incident had occurred, and the data holder would be the council.
So, just to come back, I think that's good, and I'd obviously never picked that up in the paper, but we're reliant on the driver all the time. And if we're going to put this thing in my view, it's not the driver who's been abused unless he feels strongly about it. A lot of them are so used to some of this stuff, let's be honest. They just let it go over their heads, these drunks. Say, oh, what's it? Get out of the cab. You ain't having my cab again. That to me, which they can do in the private hire, but they can't do on the ranks, because people, whether you recognise the same passenger and everything else. So my view is that we're not really in the position tonight to go forward with this. I think we should review it. I don't know, my view next year, maybe the year after. But by then, the government would have decided which way it's going. Oops.
It was just a question about those councils that have already adopted it and made it mandatory. Are they pleased with that decision and the results from that, or are they thinking of taking it out?
Nobody who's put it in are thinking about removing it, but when you think that there's 300 and something councils in the country and there's 12 that have put it in.
The question is, with those councils that have put it in, are they happy that they put it in? Have they reviewed it? Have you reviewed it with them?
So yes, I've spoken to Southampton, and they are happy that they put it in because of the serious incidents that they did have, and it has been a huge deterrent, and they haven't had any incidents of those kinds since. Some of the northern ones I haven't spoken to. I've only spoken to the ones within Hampshire.
And it's just a bit of context, Chair, to be honest, because I hear what Emma says about encouraging people to report. I think one thing I would encourage officers to consider is I suspect people will report less. The police have now got a national leaning to saying, and that they're all implementing it, that hate incidents will not be recorded, only hate crimes. I suspect that will mean less people are inclined to report, because actually they think somebody's going to go, oh, don't worry, that's not a crime, it's only an incident. So I'm with you, Chair, about reviewing it, but I think it's also that stuff is we need to make sure we've got something to review, because I am concerned, and I absolutely get all the other stuff about thinking about how it might help us with domestic abuse, but when it comes to that hate incident, I suspect we'll have less and less visibility to that, because more people will think that the police are less interested because they don't know whether it will meet the crime threshold.
I'll just come back, sorry, I'll come back, because we're all assuming that the public want this, and a lot of people don't. It's an intrusion, even in the town. Some people dislike the idea of being filmed. Now, it's done a good job since it's been in there, so it's proven. And I think we're just, not rushing it is the wrong word, but I think we should be prudent of where we're going. Tonight, personally, I would go with a recommendation tonight, but it's no, we can still put it on the works programme to have a look at it in this time next year, maybe.
The only thing I would say to that, Chair, is I don't think anybody wants anywhere to have CCTV until they get mugged, until they get burgled. And the first thing those people will do is ask their neighbours whether their Ring doorbell is working.
I'll be honest, as a bloke, I don't. CCTV's fine, but it can be misused as well, and I do wonder about that. I have asked the officers about that, and they've assured me something different. But I think there's a lot more to talk about.
It was just to go onto the record from me that if we are going to look at this again, I would be incredibly interested to see the statistics from the other councils who have implemented it, their statistics before and after they implemented it, to see what kind of effect it had, especially on verbal abuse. And obviously they've had no major incidents since it's been installed. So I think that says quite a lot for it for me. I mean, I'm minded to go with the recommendation tonight, but I really think that we do need to come back to it, and finding a way to fund it is probably the most important thing for me. Thank you.
So the recommendation, oh, sorry, I have to get my glasses, it's terrible. Old age, they call it. On the current evidence, Basingstoke does not have compelling grounds to mandate in-vehicle CCTV in licensing hackney carriages and private hire. To note that the work which has already been underway to improve public safety and reassurance, including enhancement TV coverage at the taxi rank, besides Basingstoke station. Are we willing to go along with that statement? Is it important?
It was really to understand whether we are going to ask as part of this for it to be brought back. And in fact do that, to say, depending on the timescale of that, whether we have to consider the possibility of devolution.
Well, my view would be, that's me as a chair, as an individual, would be we'd put it on the works programme for this time next year to come back. It's got a whole year to look at it. By then, hopefully the government will fund it. And I think a lot of the arguments will go out the window. Oh, we're not mean like your lot was. I shouldn't say that. I'm so used to sitting at the back, you see. Sorry, can we get that put on the works programme for us?
Yeah.
For this time next year or before, if needs be. Right, where are we? This is item 6, adoption of furniture on the highway licensing policy. 2006 to 2031. I understand, because I weren't here at the last meeting, we've actually gone through this. Talking to the officers, there's been no change, or I'll put it over to the officers to make sure I get it right.
So furniture on the highway, you looked at the policy at the November meeting. During the consultation period that took place between the 7th of November 2025 and the 2nd of January 2026, there were 2 representations received. Both were positive representations that can both be found in Appendix 1, and their responses from the licensing team also found in Appendix 1. Having reviewed those and having looked at the policy, there was no need for any amendments to the policy after those representations, and we still felt that the policy encouraged a vibrant town centre, cafe culture, and also included the accessibility and inclusive design that was asked for in one of the representations. So we are minded that the members approve for adoption the furniture on the highways policy 2026 to 2031.
Have we got any questions on this? Councillor Jones?
Yes, really on an editorial point as much as anything. If we look at 8.3 and compare it with 15.4, the content appears to be the same, except the way the paragraphs are divided, and it basically 8.3 is divided in 15.4, so that when the second sentence is a new paragraph. But that highlights the fact that there is quite a lot of repetition in here, which does make understanding and maintenance of this document rather difficult. I don't know whether we could make those two, I mean, it's a minor point to make those consistent, but there's also, there are problems of vocabulary, but let's say it's probably not the place to be going through all of those, but it really is that there are, I think, 4 sets of legislation and we're being dealt with, which are not consistent in their vocabulary, and it feels rather under-digested to me. I guess, again, if we do we see the point I was making on that previous one? Okay, if we went to 4.16, we get object as the title of that. Elsewhere in the report, it talks about furniture. So we get annoying differences of vocabulary. So that's my only point, that if this ever comes back again, which I think is about 5 years from now, it'd be nice to try and digest some of this stuff and make it more consistent.
I'm happy to have a look at that with you outside the meeting, because the second recommendation allows minor alterations like that.
So what's it, 6, isn't it? To approve the adoption of the furniture on the highway licensing policy, effect from the 3rd of February 2026. Delete the authority to the licensing team. Delegate the authority to the licensing team in constitution with the chair of licensing committee to make any necessarily minor alterations, typos and corrections into the policy before it's published. Are we happy with that? Agreed? What am I up here? I need glasses. Item 7, draft street traders policy consultation. Let's discuss. So we get. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, sorry, Emma.
That's okay. So the only sections that we're actually looking at to approve within this are linked to the fees and charges that were approved on the 2nd of November, where we introduced some shorter periods for street traders. And obviously we can't have a 28 consultation day period when you're only going to be on for a maximum of 7 days. So on page 72 and 73, the policy is approved in its entirety. It's only these track changes that we are looking to approve that align with the decision made at November's committee. The changes in point 15 were just to add some clarity, because we've been having some issues around the fact that people trying to transfer licences that they cannot transfer.
Again, it's a sort of editorial thing. Are these both meant to be the same report that we're seeing here? We're seeing version 1.1 in both cases, and one with the highlighting in red.
So they have been put in the report. Sorry, they've been put in the report twice. One is a clean version, not shown as track changes, but you as members did ask for amendments to be shown as track changes, so there's 2 versions in there.
So it is intended to be the same document. Okay, that's fine.
Councillor Midas Banks.
I just wanted to, I quite like looking at these things, saying actually if I was to thinking about setting up a business as a street trader, does it help me do it? And it's not one of your amendments that we should be looking at, Emma. I'm just conscious that when I tried to do what it suggested on 17.1, which is if you were looking for the fees, go to the street trading pages, and that's been in different versions over the years, I think, of our policy. Those pages don't show you the fees, and neither do any of the links on those pages. So I think just for ease, if I was a user, I think even if we put, and I don't know whether we're able to change the policy or just put a clearer signpost to where I can find it on the pages, because you cannot when you go to those pages, it is not anywhere.
Yeah, that's my fault. I've been fiddling around with our website and have moved all of the fees and charges to one easily be found place. But no, we can amend that as part of this amendment as well. That's not a problem.
Any more questions? Right, do we approve the draft street trading policy for consultation as shown in Appendix 1 and delegate authority to the licensing team in conjunction with the chair of licensing committee to make the necessarily minor alterations, typos, corrections to the policy before it is published? Are we all in agreement? Great, thank you very much. It's the works programme.
It's back to me again. Okay, so on your version, you've got the really interesting bit at the top. The slightly more interesting bit is on my version. So this year we've got Licensing Act and Gambling Act coming back with no amendments to date. There might be an amendment before they come back, but they're on their statutory cycle. In June, we've got the animal policy coming to include all of the new primate licensing bits and pieces. So there is a substantial change to that. Other bits in forward plan, as we've been mentioning throughout the evening, we did NTE enforcement, which is nighttime enforcement over the Christmas period. All of the premises that we inspected in Basingstoke and Dean were promoting Ask for Angela and safe drinking policies and providing lids for drinks where requested. So there was safer drinking over the Christmas period. 16 vehicles were inspected while the officers were out and about, and only one of them required a follow-up action because their no booking, no ride stickers had come off, which they'd followed up afterwards. NTE happens every quarter, and Q4 NTE is imminent when the officers will be going out. So during NTE, we look at premises that we've had intel about during the month before generally, or has cumulative problems, and some of our bigger premises that just need to be kept an eye on. On Friday of this week, we have our first Operation Make Safe meeting. Operation Make Safe is a police operation. I worked on it previously in an old guise of it with the Met Police when it was just around hotels and people taking underage children into hotels. It is now expanded, and it is focused in the taxi trade around people trafficking, county lines, and the things that affect us here in Basingstoke and Dean. So we're actively getting involved in that. We've made a new connection in Hampshire Police with the police drug dog handler, and have already in Hart done a drug dog round NTE, and that will be taking place in Basingstoke as well to identify any problems that we might have in that area. We've got a new premises come in to the top of town where the rhubarb was. We're just waiting for the premises licence and pavement licence for that to come in, but that has now been taken over by new owners. And something that was also requested at the top of town meeting was the lack of visibility of operators for safe travel in the nighttime economy. So now on the website under our public registers, we need permission from them, and we're starting to get that through. It's starting to list the operators within Basingstoke and Deane and their contact details. There's already been requests for us to amend that slightly because it doesn't say currently whether they're wheelchair access or not. So we are looking at continuously improving that page so people know that there's more out there than just Alpha. And that's it.
Any more questions? So it's Hart, Councillor Hart.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Look, that sounds very, very cool. I wondered if I could trouble you for that in like very brief bullet minuted sort of written format, please, just because I didn't get it all down.
I'll send a copy to go in the minutes to Phil.
Thank you.
We've got no exempt items, so that is the end of the meeting. We've got to thank the officers for putting up with me and the rest of you, especially us Joneses. Anyway, thanks very much.